Hello, and welcome to this inaugural episode of Everything is Interesting, in which I shall attempt to think of a catchphrase while explaining that it's all about me working on my paintings, while telling you interesting things about uninteresting subjects. Today, A is for aubergines, artichokes, and avocado. Yep. Those three deeply uninteresting vegetables are the topic. For one thing, we need to talk about, are they vegetables or aren't they? This is one of these discussions that everybody seems to think is important. Is it a vegetable or is it a fruit? La la la, the whole tomato issue. Now, my stance on this is that they're vegetables, because a vegetable is any part of a plant that you eat. Or to be more precise, any part of a plant that you're supposed to eat. You can always find idiots who will eat pretty much anything. Welcome to the internet. But, parts of a plant that you want to eat are vegetables. It's the only sensible definition. But it hurts. It culturally hurts to call, like, a pineapple a vegetable or a cherry a vegetable or something. So we kind of exclude some vegetables from that list just because they don't feel like they're vegetables. But they are. So aubergines and artichokes and avocados are all vegetables. On top of that, aubergines are fruits, avocados are fruits, and artichokes, weirdly, are thistles. They're flowers from a thistle. Anyway, why have I chosen these? Well, they all start with A, which is one of these things that I think I'll be doing. I think I'll be running through the alphabet. So that's one thing. But another thing is, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about when we start talking about these things. So let's start with the aubergines. One thing that I've always wondered, until recently when I just looked it up, is why Americans call aubergines eggplants. If you look at an aubergine, it's big and purple. It looks like an emoji of an eggplant, but it doesn't look like an egg, at all. So I was wondering, why would they call it an eggplant? It doesn't taste anything like an egg either. So I was like, why? But it turns out that some aubergines are, in fact, quite round and quite white and look startlingly like chicken eggs. It's quite scary. So, in fact, it's a very, very obvious choice to call them an eggplant. If you see them growing and they're the white ones, they're just like, what else would you call them? Just look them up. If you look them up, you'll see what I mean. They are astonishingly eggy. But anyway, they're fruits. And they're fruits from a quite interesting family of plants, tubers, and these nightshade family, which don't want to be eaten. And that's kind of one of my points, is that it's deeply fascinating to look at what human beings have taught themselves to eat over the course of the millennia we've been alive. Because we humans are geniuses when it comes to extracting nourishment from our surroundings. It's incredible. And we are quite good at making plants which kind of don't really want to be eaten, for whatever reason, into something that can be eaten. And the nightshade family is poisonous to some degree. And the nightshade family contains lots of vegetables we're quite used to. Tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, all that kind of stuff, and aubergines. And so aubergines, first fun fact of the day, aubergines are slightly poisonous. You have to eat a lot of goddamn aubergines to, make yourself poisoned from an aubergine. I think going to the emergency room and telling people that you've overdosed on aubergines is a bit ridiculous. I don't think that happens very often. But it can, in principle, happen if they contain small amounts of these poisons. And in the wild form, they're much more poisonous than in the cultivated form. But that's what we humans can do. We can just breed. We can breed and breed and breed until the poisonous, scary things become cute and innocent and edible and fun to put in burgers. I'm talking about tomatoes now, not aubergines. That would be weird. Or potatoes for that matter. So that's kind of interesting. In fact, one of the members of the nightshade family, one of the sort of distant cousins of the aubergine, not only is poisonous, but the poison has become a spice. And I am talking about the humble chili. It has a poison in it, a toxin called capsicum, something like that, sorry. Something capsy. I'm not a botanist, forgive me. But that's poison. That's the reason the poor defenseless chili peppers contain the poison is because they don't want to be eaten. It's the classic trick of plants. Plants can't really do much else to avoid being eaten. They can't run away. They can't sort of give you a stern warning. They can't sue you in court. They can't really do much to keep themselves from being consumed, except being disgusting. That's a classic trick. A lot of them do that. Or poisonous. And the chili pepper has chosen to become poisonous. And this capsicum thing is a poison. And we like it, because we kind of like cultivated it so we can choose exactly how much of this poison is in it. And we eat it and we go, ooh, it's burning my mouth. Yay. And the reason it's burning your mouth, dear reader, listener, viewer, whatever the hell you are, presumably viewer, if you're reading this, how? It's because the poor chili plant doesn't want you to eat it. It's basically trying to scare you away. And instead we're going like, ooh, let's produce a whole cuisine around this taste. That, my friends, are what humans can do. And I kind of like that, the way we can sort of handle this kind of stuff. So I will use the aubergines, eggplant, as sort of like the introduction to the interesting nature of plants in general. And artichokes are absolutely another example of this, of how humans simply decide, today I'm going to eat this, and I'm not going to die of hunger, thanks. And I don't really care that you are a thistle and this is your flower. We're going to find a way of making you delicious. And welcome to artichokes. Artichokes are the unripe flowers of thistles. Now, thistles, as we all know, are those little shitty plants which grow in gardens and you don't want them. And they just basically hate you because they poke you in the fingers as soon as you touch them. They're just like, eh. They're deeply antisocial. They are slightly lower tech than sort of like nettles. Nettles don't just prick you with a little needle. They just poison your skin and make you hate them for that reason. But thistles they're a simple breed. They just go, I hate you. If you try to eat me, I will kill your lips with horrible pain. Plants really aren't very polite when you think about it. But the humans, as humans are, have discovered a way of cultivating these thistles so that it makes a big, fat, juicy plant flower. And before the flower blooms, we eat it with butter, and we enjoy it. Take that, thistle. But the reason I'm mentioning artichokes, because they're not really all that interesting, is that there is another plant called the Jerusalem artichoke. That's another vegetable, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. Mainly because the name of the Jerusalem artichoke is absolutely garbage. There is nothing artichokey about the Jerusalem artichoke. Also, it has nothing to do with Jerusalem. It is a terrible name. What it actually is a little potato-y kind of thing, which grows in the ground. It's a root, and you dig it up, and it's vaguely potato-y. It has sort of like a nutty potato flavour. My personal experience with them is that they're great in soup, and they are a pain in the arse to peel, because they're sort of really nubbly, and they don't seem to want to cooperate with my potato peeler very much. But they're good. I don't care enough about them to actually cook with them very often, but they are good. But Jerusalem artichokes, why are they called this when they are not from Jerusalem, nor are they artichokes? We may as well call them, I don't know, Boston pancakes. They're nothing like it. They have no association with anything at all to those two things. So why? Well, I kind of like this. For one thing, the artichoke part, right? That comes from just, I don't understand French people, sorry, but a French person, a French explorer who dug them out of the South Americas, which they were exploring at the time. Of course, this is a story about many of these nightshades, is that we found them as a sort of side product of the Europeans going to the Americas and making themselves at home, shall we say. That's a nice way of saying genocide, isn't it? But one of those sort of consequences was that lots of these tubers made their way to Europe, including potatoes and stuff, of course. And the Jerusalem artichoke, according to the French person, they tasted it and said, they remind me of artichokes in the taste. And I mean, I've tried Jerusalem artichokes, and I've tried artichokes, and it's just not real. I mean, what the hell was that guy on? They do not remind you of artichokes. They remind you of all kinds of other stuff. As I said, they're sort of like a potato-y kind of flavour with a bit of a nut aftertaste to it, and they're kind of crisp when they're raw and stuff. Artichoke? No. Artichokes are just these weird, fleshy things which have no categorization at all. They're nothing like each other. So they're called Jerusalem artichokes because one French person has no taste buds and maybe just couldn't think of another plant but an artichoke or something. I don't know. But where does the Jerusalem part come from? Was it because they were imported through Jerusalem? No. Was it because they are divine and delicious and they taste like Jesus? Well, Jesus tastes like bread and wine, doesn't he? According to... sorry, getting distracted. No, that's not the reason either. The reason... the best explanation we have for this is that the Italians named it girasole, which means following the sun, like turning towards the sun. And that's because it's related to the sunflowers. If you plant these Jerusalem artichokes in the ground, they will go crazy and like shoot these massive sunflowers. Everybody knows what sunflowers do. Sunflowers are just like the most over-ambitious flowers in the world. You plant like a sunflower seed, and then later it's just like, hello, I am 10 meters tall. Is that okay? And we're like, what? Why? All other flowers can like keep themselves slightly under control, but not the sunflowers. They're just like massive. They're just like, I want to be a tree. And we tell them that you're not a tree, you're a flower, you have to behave yourself. And they don't listen because they've got no ears. Anyhow, the Jerusalem artichoke is related quite closely to the sunflower, so it does the same thing, and it has these massive shoots, and with big yellow flowers on them. So they look like sunflowers, and girasole means turning after the sun, blah, blah, blah. So they were called girasole artichokes. And they go to the US, and what happens is linguistic corruption. People don't know what girasole means, so they just say girasole artichoke, Jerusalem. There you go. So Jerusalem just became like, I guess, what did you say? Jerusalem artichoke? Okay. People just repeated girasole until they didn't. This is what happens when people who can't speak Italian, it includes me, by the way, but people who can't speak Italian to each other. The words just vanish into nothingness, and it becomes Jerusalem. So that is the stupid story of why a Jerusalem artichoke is called a Jerusalem artichoke. Which I think is kind of interesting, isn't it? There's a bit of linguistics and stuff like that in there. So that is my story about the Jerusalem artichokes. And also, by the way, again, an example of how we can find food in anything, because the cultivated versions of Jerusalem artichokes are still kind of annoying to eat. They're still kind of just little nubbins. They're nothing like potatoes. Potatoes are really user-friendly. Jerusalem artichokes are not. But when you look at the original sort of roots that were eaten by the Native Americans, they're terrible. They're just like teeny tiny little specks of nourishment, and you have to be very creative to even see that is possibly food. But it is, and that is what we humans are so good at. We're so good at extracting survival from the surroundings. It's unreal. I love it. And that brings me to the avocado, the humble avocado, which is another one of these imported plants from the Americas into Europe. It's a very important plant for South American cultures, and they have been sucked into European culture in a similar way to the Jerusalem artichoke. It has a name, avocado, as you may have noticed, which is Spanish or Portuguese or something-y for lawyer. Avocado means lawyer. Now, you may wonder, why did we name an avocado after a lawyer? Are the avocado trees natural lawyers? Do they sue you as you walk by? That would be cool, but no, they don't. That would be also quite baffling if they did. They do not. So why do we call them lawyers? Is it because lawyers look like avocados? No, not at all. What are you thinking about? Why did you even ask me that question, you idiot? Why on earth are they called lawyers? Well, they're called lawyers because what happened was that the Spanish explorers, asked the natives, what are these amazing fruits? What do you call them? And they said, ahuacatl, which is what they call it. And then the Spanish people at this very moment discovered that they didn't understand Native American language at all, so they're just like, what? Avocado? Sure, whatever. And they just kind of, they just called it the closest word in their own language to the sound that those Native Americans made, which is a really racist thing to do. Instead of asking, like, what does that mean, or how do you translate that, just, like, find the nearest word in your own language and say, okay, sure, that. That's not okay. But that's what they did. So they called them lawyers. because that's what they thought they were called. But aguacatl does not mean lawyer. It means testicle. Oh yes, because the avocados grow in pairs on trees, and they kind of look quite a lot like a scrotum. So the no-nonsense, non-embarrassed Native Americans simply called them the ball fruit. They simply said, these guys are testicles. That's how they said that, and that's how they finally got the name, after so many seconds, they got the name testicle fruit. So aguacatl means testicles. This is also what's called guacamole, by the way. Guacamole is aguacatamole or something. It comes from that. It's just, again, we just didn't give a crap about actually listening to what they said, so it just became guac instead of avocado. So, yeah. I'm a bit sad, actually, that they ended up being called lawyers, because lawyers are just a stupid name for them. The original name they were called, by the people who discovered them before they took the name, was alligator pear. Isn't that cool? Isn't that the best name in the world for them? Because they look like pears covered with alligator skin. That's amazing. I wish they were called alligator pears. That would be so better. I will ask you, maybe just next time you talk about an avocado, just call them an alligator pear, just to your friends and family. And one of two things will happen. Either the word will take on a new second life, and everybody will start calling them alligator pears, and the world will become a better place. Or the other option is that your family will look at you as if you're insane, and possibly send you to bed without your supper, which would be no avocados for you. It's a great risk, but I suggest that you take it. Anyway, the avocado is a fascinating fruit for reasons you can't even possibly comprehend until I start talking about this. It is completely anachronistic. It should not exist at all. It is a time traveler. It's a ghost in the most insane way. This plant is something which really should not have existed anymore. It should have gone extinct millions upon millions of years ago. And there's a reason it didn't, and I'll get to that, but it should do, and I'll explain to you why. The avocado, if you look at it, it is a weird fruit, isn't it? Because, when you cut it open, there's this huge stone in the middle. Gigantic stone. And we all know why fruits have stones, like berries have stones in them, right? They have stones, and I'm sure if this shocks the younger members of my audience, I have no idea who my audience is, but if people who don't know what pooping is are listening, then I'm afraid I'm about to blow your little minds. Because the reason there are seeds in berries is because the berries, unlike the nightshades who hate everything and don't want to be eaten at all, unlike those, berries really, really, really want to be eaten because they kind of booby-trap themselves. They say, ooh, look at me, animal. I have a delicious, delicious fruity fruit on my branches. Why don't you eat them? They're delicious and free. Yummy, yum, yum. And the animals are like, sure, I see no problem with that. And the animal eats the entire fruit, including the seed. Now, the animal goes about its daily businesses, and later on in the day, it has a little shit. And inside that little shitty shit, there will be the seed. And the wonderful thing about that for the plant is, because the plant will be in the background or somewhere else, it's like, ha, my evil plan worked. This stupid animal, it ate the fruit, then walked away somewhere, so it doesn't, my children do not crowd me and steal my light. That's something that's very important to plants. Not so much to humans, but to plants it's like a big deal that your children do not grow right next to you, because then their leaves might overshadow your leaves and you don't get the sunlight. It's a big thing for plants, okay? It's one of the biggest arguments in plant families. But so it's like, yeah, my God, my child is far away from me. And not only that, but it has been planted not in the ground, no, but in a big steaming pile of delicious manure. I like manure. I am a plant, says the plant, to remind itself of its duties upon this earth. And so, that's the trick with berries, right? So back to the avocado. You cut up the avocado, and this huge seed. Now you show me an animal. I challenge you. Show me an animal who would eat an avocado, seed and whole, and not notice that bastard of a seed inside. I mean, if you swallowed a whole avocado, I bet you would be like, oh, there was something in that. I should probably not eat any more of those. Ooh, no thanks. That would be kind of disturbing, right? The only elephant I can think of is an elephant. That is a general rule. The only animal I can think of is an elephant. The elephants can do that. I mean, the elephants can probably just like inhale an avocado and not really notice the seed because they're so huge. But that's about it, right? I don't think any other animal would be into it in the same sense. And that is interesting, because why does the avocado do it then? Why is the avocado such an idiot? Why does it not make its seed smaller so that more animals can eat it? The answer is, it doesn't know. It doesn't know that it's not actually doing a very clever trick from back in the day. In the old days, there were lots of huge mammals. It was called megafauna. We had massive of them, like huge sloths and saber-toothed tigers and mammoths. And, we used to have, before the last ice age, like, say, 50,000 years ago, something like that, we used to have a bunch of gigantic animals happily chomping down on these avocados and happily doing the avocado's dirty business of being transported somewhere else to land in a nice big pile of poo. That's what the avocado thinks it's still doing. The idiot does not realize that that's not what's going on anymore. The only reason why it's even still alive, why it hasn't gone extinct, because it would have gone extinct, of course. It goes extinct the same moment that the animals that are able to spread its seed goes extinct. It's completely reliant on them. But after the last ice age, we have humans. And humans are like, ooh, avocados, they're pretty tasty. And they're kept alive by humans. So the poor idiot avocados, next time you look at an avocado, you should know that it's grown from a tree which is like, ha-ha, this will be eaten by a mammoth. It has no clue. It is completely baffled by the fact that it's been kept alive entirely by humans. If no humans existed, there would be no avocados. They would be dead, which is fascinating. It's just like an evolutionary anachronism. It should not exist, yet it does. And that is kind of cool, right? So it's a time traveler. It's a time traveler which doesn't know it's time traveling because it's a plant and it has no brain. But still, it's still a time traveler, which is essentially the coolest thing in the world. But it's not even just that. It is actually a double time traveler, because the whole family of plants to which the avocado belongs is a relict species, it's called. A relict species is a species which survived and change in the environment which should have killed it, basically. It's something that should be extinct but isn't. It's a kind of a weird thing in biology, but that's what it is. It's simply an animal or a plant which ought to have been dead. Like, all the sort of the mechanisms of typical evolution should have killed it, but for some reason it found a place to survive. And they usually only survive in very, very specific environments, which just happens to still keep it alive, right? And the whole avocado family, I can't remember what the family is called, but that thrived in Gondwanaland, which is like millions and millions of years ago, before tectonic shifts and stuff created the map we're used to looking at today. They were fine there, but then, geological time happened and things start moving around. And these poor avocado plant family things only survive in little, areas which keeps it alive. Like tropical mountains and like little valleys where it just works. Anyway, and that's called a relic species. And the whole family is a relic species. And now I'm going to blow your mind again, because one of the other plants in the avocado family is cinnamon. Yeah, you heard me. Cinnamon is related directly to avocado, and they're both time travelers from Gondwanaland from millions and millions of years ago, from dinosaur times. And they shouldn't exist. But cinnamon found a way of surviving without doing the trick with the huge mammals. So somehow avocado is just the most unlikely creature, well, not really a creature, a plant, that ever existed, because it should have died anyway, but it found a way to survive. And then the way it found to survive was to be eaten by huge animals, which then went extinct. And it's still going because it happened to be delicious to humans. So that's why it's still alive. So it is a hugely strange plant. And when you look at it, it kind of, when you know this, picture an avocado now, right? Doesn't it look like something from another time? It doesn't really it doesn't really fit with the other kind of plants that we know of and have. And there's a reason for that. It really isn't. It really is a plant from a distant past. And I think that's pretty damn cool. Right, I'm going to talk for about 5 more minutes, then I've talked for half an hour about these things. What else can I say? Oh yes, I can tell you about, since humans are so deeply essential to avocado survival, we should probably talk about how humans have done it. And it's kind of interesting, because pretty much every avocado you've ever eaten, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that every avocado you've ever eaten is a fruit from a cloned plant, which was invented or discovered or randomly bred by a mailman in the US called Rudolf Hass. Hass, not Hess, please. He was a mailman who decided on what I would call a little bit of a risky move to sell everything he owned and take a huge loan to buy avocado plants. He saw an advert in the newspaper where there was a picture of avocado trees with money growing on them, and he was like, wow, that's for me. And he basically just upended his entire career and decided to become an avocado farmer right then and there. It's kind of risky. I would not recommend that kind of choices, but it turned out pretty well for him, because it so happened that he randomly hybridized somehow, and I'm really not a gardener, so I don't know how, but somehow he managed to sort of like graft one avocado tree onto another kind of avocado tree, whatever, and produce the Hass avocado, which is the avocados that you eat now. He took a patent of these avocados. He patented an avocado, which is kind of funny. So this patented avocado is the avocado that you are eating when you eat avocados. So they're all kind of cloned from this same tree, which a mailman randomly invented. Also, he almost chopped it down. He was like, this is it, because it's a tiny little tree. It doesn't really grow as high as the other ones, the normal ones. So he's almost about to chop it down, and he asked his gardener friend to go and chop this tree down. And the gardener friend was like, give it some time, let's see. It may have some potential, just let it grow and see what happens. What happened was he revolutionized the avocado industry and became extraordinarily wealthy. So that's probably a good idea that he doesn't chop it down. But it's so random. Like, that's the whole story of avocado history is just peppered with these luck stories. It is the most lucky fruit in the whole world. I don't know. I mean, maybe there are others that have similar stories that I just don't know about. But it seems like it is the most lucky fruit in the whole world to me. How much time do I have? Oh, I still have 2.5 minutes. Let's see what I can talk about. There's another A, apples. That's really dull. But they have the same kind of problem that avocados have, that you have to clone them. You have to basically make cultivars of the same tree. You can't just plant an apple seed. I don't know if you know this, but if you try and plant, if you have like a really tasty apple, let's say a pink lady. I like pink lady apples. Let's say you plant a pink lady apple seed, expecting to get a pink lady apple tree, you will be sorely disappointed, because pink lady apple seeds do not produce pink lady apple trees. They just produce random apples. It's just the way apples work. You can't expect the fruit from the seed to look anything like the fruit of the plant that you get from it. It's quite strange, but that's the way it works. The way you make sure that the fruits that you get are the right kind of fruit, they look the same way. You have to clone them. You have to sort of like chop off the limbs of the trees and like pode them onto something else. And again, I am not a gardener, so how that is done in practice, I really don't know. Please don't ask me, but it is how it's done. So that's how, like, if you eat a pit lady, they're all like clones of each other, pretty much, or at least fruits of clones, fruits of copies. And that can bring me to, here in the last minute, I can say something about Granny Smith. Oh, Granny Smith. Granny Smith, of course, is an apple, but it was also an actual woman whose last name was Smith and who had 8 grandchildren. So her name was Granny Smith. This is pretty obvious stuff, really, but they called her Granny Smith, and she was cooking. She had like an apple orchard with like vaguely boring apples, just like so many other people. But she was cooking with these apples, and she threw the apple cores out of the window. And it turned out that some of these apple cores just landed right outside the window, and somehow chance hybridized with some other apple tree from somewhere. Nobody knows how the hell it happened, but she ended up with this apple tree, which produces these green, crispy apples, which are very highly valued, and they're called Granny Smith. So, again, random crap. The whole world eats Granny Smith apples, named after a person who just threw apple cores out of a window. And if she'd thrown the apple core at a bit different angle, or at a different day, or if the wind had been going the different direction that day, whatever, we would never have known anything about Granny Smith. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That's half an hour. I hope you found that interesting. Let's see what I talk about next time as I continue this painting. Thank you.